Welcome to the Transformative Pathways Podcast with your host, Jason Doby. Join Jason as he explores the many ways to unlock personal growth, mindfulness, and spiritual transformation. So now, please welcome the host of Transformative Pathways, Jason Doby.
Hey, what's happening, everybody? I'm your host, Jason Doby, founder of Transformative Pathways Life Coaching. Thank you so much for joining us today. Our topic for today's episode is mindful parenting with our guest, Emry Kettle, who's joining us today from Vienna, Austria. Emry is a child behavior specialist and parent coach, specializing in trauma-informed care and neurodivergent support. She is passionate about giving parents valuable insights into how their children interpret the world around them, including the parent's own behavior, empowering families to build happy and healthy dynamics. Emry, welcome to the show, my friend. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I love that you were my second guest and now I'm
Yeah,
your second guest.
yeah, that worked out pretty cool, didn't it?
Yes, it did. Look at us go. Woo.
Pretty awesome. Oh, pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. So first off, Emry, I just have to say that I really love the work that you're doing in the world, working with parents and helping them out. As a father of three myself, I can definitely speak to the challenges of being a parent for sure. Um,
Yeah. Thanks. I hear all the time from folks who, they meet me and I share what I do and they're like, wow, that must be so rewarding. And then they take a beat and you can see them thinking, and then they inevitably always say, and exhausting. Yes to both. That is correct.
yeah, I can only imagine. All right, Emry. So to start things off, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and how you became a parent coach?
I'd love to. I'll there's the long version and then there's the short version, and I'll start with the shorter one. Essentially, I started working with kids when I was around 15 years old, and I loved it. My high school had this class where we had a daycare on site. So I was in the class being taught by my teacher how to take care of these young kids. And it was all just really resonating with me. I did not have the childhood that I wanted. And I was seeing how it was possible to create an environment for other kids that was better than the one that I got. And that really jazzed me. I thought that was so cool that I had the power to create a great environment for a kid. So that's where it started. And then it just kind of kept tumbling from there. I ended up getting my degree in early childhood development, which is, very heavy psych focused and all about how the brain interprets information. And then I started encountering families who were going, well, why is my kid doing this? And why aren't they listening when I'm saying that? And I realized that through my learning and through my experience and through listening to lots and lots of families, I had answers. And then I would model new behaviors and they would work. And it was really just blowing my mind that suddenly parents were getting relief from these power struggles with their kids, and the kids were getting relief from their parents constantly telling them what to do. And here I am many years later.
Wow, that's amazing. And
Thank you.
when we first met originally, I remember you told me that you were from the US. So how did you end up in Austria?
Uh, because of a kid, a friend of mine from high school had a kid, and he was having not just a lot of health issues, but a lot of behavioral issues.
Mhm.
And she was desperately trying to find people to support her and her child. Doctors weren't listening, therapists weren't listening, nobody was helping. She went through au pair agencies, trying to just get different childcare people in, trying to find anybody who could offer her and her son appropriate support. And nobody was capable. And she was just at the end of her rope. And this is about the same time I was finishing up my degree. And she wrote me and was like, how about you come live with us in Vienna and help my kid? And I was like, that sounds like a really cool idea. Let's try that out. So I went for the summer, fell in love with their family, fell in love with Vienna. Anybody who's ever been to Vienna will understand exactly what I'm talking about when I say that. It's hard to not fall in love with this city. Um, so yeah, I came out here for the summer. Things went great. I went back to Seattle, packed up my stuff, came back, and that was 10 years ago. And that
Wow.
kid is now 13 years old and shaving and has braces and like is living his best teenager life and thriving. Really, truly thriving. So exciting.
Wow, that's amazing. What a great story. And I love how you said that, you didn't, have the best childhood or the childhood that you wanted. So that's what really inspired you to, kind of work with kids to, help them have the life or, the things that you didn't get when you were
Yes.
a child.
Every time. Well, and relating that to our topic about mindful parenting, um, and you and I talked about this on my pod too, that every generation typically is always trying to do better than the one before. And I understand that my parents were doing better than their parents treated them. Uh, and it's okay that it wasn't enough. It's okay for me to say, well, objectively, my childhood wasn't great. Um, so that piece about being mindful, about being thoughtful, the awareness of what we can create, and how we can create an adverse situation instead of a traumatizing situation, or an ideal situation instead of an abusive situation. I love that we can shift the needle from trauma to discomfort. That's huge.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's amazing how, our journey in life, the things we go through in life often will lead us to our life's purpose. People will say, I can't believe this happened to me, but really, at the end of the day, these things may have happened to us for a reason to get us ready for what the bigger purpose is in our life. And I think that's very fascinating.
I that's so interesting because I used to feel the same way as what you just said, but I've changed my mind over the last few
Interesting.
years, and but I don't know that it's necessarily all that different in the end. I guess it really just depends on your point of view.
Mhm.
So I don't necessarily think that things happen for a reason so much anymore. Whereas I think we can create a reason out of something.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Um, yeah, and for me, that feels more intentional and more
Mhm.
deliberate and less like, well, whatever happens, happens. That is part of living life. Whatever happens, happens.
Yeah.
But for me, taking that power back was really pivotal. And maybe it's just because I am so trauma focused, right? That a trauma happens, and I'm never going to say to a trauma survivor of any kind, well, that happened for a reason. It happened
Yeah,
because
I get what
somebody
you're
made a
saying.
terrible decision. And we can do something about it. We're not helpless. We can be part of our own healing process.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I guess it's not, maybe I worded that wrongly, that it happened for a reason because, something bad can happen to someone and they could use that to stay in a lack mindset for their whole life. Some people never get out of it, right? Or they could use it to empower themselves and try to help other people, which is what you did.
Thank you. And I mean, there's room for both, right? It depends on the person. It depends where they're at on their journey, and it depends on the thing. It's very easy to say, oh, I missed that bus or that plane, or I missed my appointment. That happened for a reason. That's totally fair game. But when it's about trauma, I do think that language distinction is really important
Mhm.
because of the hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good point. Thank you for sharing
Thanks.
that.
I think about this stuff a lot, Jason.
That's
It's
good.
kind of my jam.
And so, just a note on our topic, mindful parenting. What exactly is mindful parenting, and how would you describe that?
So, how I would describe it, being mindful, um, each person has their own definition, and that's fine. Mindfulness is generally about accepting things without judgment. Um, so, I want to hold space for like the true definition of mindfulness. When I say it, what I'm talking about is awareness, the thoughtfulness. Uh, I think a lot of parents, people go into parenting in all sorts of different ways, but by and large, they go in typically ill equipped. And that's not through a fault of their own. That's just kind of how we're set up as a society.
The way it
Peop
is.
That's just what it is. People are excited. They want to have an adorable little baby and they want to give all their love to this tiny little human. And those are wonderful, wonderful things. And then at some point, that little human starts having opinions and really intense wants and needs and, really big lung capacities for screaming. And then we find ourselves reacting rather than responding. And this is where I would say being mindful is the most critical, is when our kids are pissing us off. And they will, parents, they will piss you off. There's no two ways about it. You aren't special. You can't dodge it. Your kids are gonna piss you off, and how you react or respond in those moments is going to make the difference. And you and I talked on my pod about that meditation, that time to take a breath before reacting, so you can move that needle, shift from reactivity to responsiveness. And I think any parent listening can identify with that and go, oh, yeah, I can think about, 5 times off the top of my head when I reacted. And it was very simply stop, don't, no, don't do that, or come here, as opposed to, whew, wow, that's a choice that my child's making. And if I engage in a power struggle, then we're just going to stay in that holding pattern and it's never going to change. And then if they can respond, then that's where the teaching happens. That's where the building trust happens. That's where generational traumas get broken, is in those small, breathy moments.
Mhm.
That's what I would call mindful parenting.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, what sort of tools do you give the parents that you work with to help them, respond instead of react, and to help them, make the right decision in that moment?
I'm such a fan of the phrase tools. I talk all the time. Anybody who knows me, any of my clients know that I talk nonstop about tools for their toolbox. I'm just obsessed with it because sometimes, one tool is right for the job, and then the same situation can happen an hour later, and that same tool is not going to work. So you have to dig around in your toolbox or in your little tool bag, and you got to find another one. But some of my favorites are breathing exercises. And, there's a million breathing exercises that you can do. Um, and I, I also love showing parents. I love modeling how to let go of anger. So in those moments where the kid is triggered and you're triggered, everybody needs to just like let it out. Like you got to release the steam valve, right? And so we take a pillow and we throw it on the bed, or we throw it on the floor, or we hit the pillow. And the parent then models this for their child. And it just looks hilarious to see a grown adult having a tantrum on a pillow. So it diffuses the situation for one, but it genuinely allows both parties to let out some of their ick feelings
Hmm.
and kind of get back to center. But the biggest thing that using a tool to create a space in these hard moments, the biggest thing it's going to do for you is get, instead of you and your child against each other, it's going to put the two of you on the same team fighting the problem together. That's the
I love that.
best thing. It will
I love,
solve, I mean, really, it solves everything. You and your kid against the problem, not you versus your child.
I love that. I need to try that. So next time my daughter's having a temper tantrum, we need to get some pillows out and release our, because you have to release that energy somehow,
Ye
right?
Yes, it's gotta come out. Tears are wonderful. Tears are how our body self-regulates. Hitting a pillow is a totally safe activity. I know a lot of people are really concerned, well, doesn't that teach hitting? No, it really, really doesn't. It's a super safe activity. Allowing allowing a hit on a pillow is so very, very different than harming a person. It's not a harmful thing. It's not teaching violence. I promise you. Super safe activity. Burying your face in your bed and screaming. It's not teaching screaming, it's teaching regulation. Super, super safe activity. Highly recommend. Highly recommend it as an adult. We need to let those big feelings out too. Rage rooms, if you're an adult, fabulous. For a child, heavy work. So, heavy work, if you're not familiar, is, have you ever gone for a run, or gone like all out and done like as many push-ups as you could until failure, or any kind of like a really hard workout
Mhm.
until you just couldn't do anything anymore? Do you know what I'm talking
Yep.
about?
Yep.
Yeah. And that feeling afterward of, "Oh, I got it all out." That's what heavy work does for your kid. And heavy work can be anything that gives that sensory input. Moving boxes, pushing against a wall, throwing the pillow over and over again, all sorts. There's really no end to these
Mhm.
ideas.
I know one thing that's worked well with me, my oldest daughter, she has very, 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 very strong emotions when she gets
Mm.
angry. You know, when she was little, she used to just trash her whole room. She'd be in her room, she'd be trashing everything. And, you know, she hits her mom when she gets mad. Um, but, you know, she's doing a lot better now. She's just a very, very strong personality. But in the summertime, I would tell her, you know, go for a walk, go walk around the block, or get on your bike and go for a bike ride, because now she's old enough that she can do that. And it's just amazing when she can go from a 10 out of 10. And after she goes for a bike ride, she comes back, it's like nothing ever happened. She's happy and she got all that energy out.
Regulation is huge. And, when they're younger, you've got to co regulate, you've got to model it, you've got to teach it.
Hmm.
Kids aren't going to figure out how to regulate all on their own. Eh, Within reason, they can do little parts of it. And, but that doesn't translate to these bigger emotions. So, if a kid is trashing their room, to me that is a clear indicator. That's like a clear red flag that's saying, whoa, this child needs some coping strategies. They need some more ideas. These parents are probably struggling to model co-regulation.
Hmm.
And, as we talked about on my pod, and you shared how tricky that was for you in the beginning until you started modeling
Hmm.
those regulation behaviors. And now look, you're able to pass that on to your kid. How
Hmm.
beautiful is that?
Oh, it's great. I think the challenge that we had is we had twins. My oldest daughter was 18 months when the twins were born. So we
Can
had
I
three under
just
the age
say,
of 2.
Jason, that's wild.
Yeah, it was. And I used to always joke with my wife, like, "Oh, we're gonna have twins," because my wife is a twin as well. And I used to always say, "We're gonna have twins, so be careful what you ask for, because it might just come true." But I
That
feel, you know, looking back now, I feel bad for my oldest daughter, because in a way she was kind of neglected because we didn't have the time to spend with her. She went from being, the number one thing in our world, and then we come home with these two other babies, and she's only 18 months old. She's just a baby herself still. And,
Yeah.
that was a rough time. And my wife and I, we got our hands full with the other two. And a lot of times she was kind of pushed to the side because we were too busy. So I think a lot of the problems that we encountered, had to do with that. And looking back now, I just feel horrible. And obviously, like you said, when you're a parent, you have no idea what the hell you're doing. If I can go back now, I would maybe do some things a little bit differently. But wow, it was definitely a wild ride. But we're doing a lot better now. That's for
I
sure.
love that for all of you. And one of my favorite things to tell parents is that it's literally never too late. There's no such thing as uh irreparable damage. I mean, okay, there are some boundaries there. Within reason, there's no such thing as irreparable damage. What you're describing to me sounds a lot like a non-ideal situation, and that is so easy to come back from, and you've already done that. And the other thing here too is, what kind of parent do you want to be in 10, 20, 30 years when your adult child comes back to you and says, "Hey dad, like the twins took over my life, and that like ruined some birthday parties, and I felt like I wasn't as important anymore." How are you going to respond then? Because there's a big difference between a parent who goes, "Oh, I did the best I could. Oops, sorry," and a parent who says, "How can I repair this with you?
Mhm.
How can I make sure that you feel unconditionally, unequivocally, absolutely loved by me all the time from now on? What are your needs?"
Yeah, that's a
How
really good point.
healed how healed would we be if we could talk to our parents like that and they responded that way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have had those conversations with my daughter. She's only 8 years old now, but I have said, when you were little, I wish I did this differently, and I wish we did that differently. Because here's the thing too, from her perspective, when we're doing bedtime, if I'm reading a story in her sister's room and I read one story each and to each of her sisters, then go back to her room, I've read everyone one story, but in her mind, I was in her sister's room longer because I read
And
two
she's
stories.
right.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
she's right. And one thing that we did a couple years ago, because she was in a room all by herself, and she said to me, "It's not fair. You and mom sleep together in a room, and Hannah and Leah sleep together, and how come I have to stay by myself?" So what we did was we bought a bunk bed that had a pull out bed underneath, and the three of them slept in the same room for about 2 years. And she just moved back into her own room. I think it was this summer, actually. She wants her own room back, but that solved a lot of problems for us when they were all together, just a simple thing like that.
Oh, that totally brings tears to my eyes. Like, I'm so proud of kids when they can self-advocate, when they can already be so aware of what their actual needs are. Like, to know that she felt lonely and to be able to verbalize that, and to also say like, "Well, actually you were with my sisters twice as long. Mm-mm, that's not fair." That is incredible. And I will say, when I hear kids saying things like that, that is a pretty clear indicator to me of what's happening in the home, meaning what the parents are teaching. Most kids can't come up with those sorts of things all on their own, right? They learn critical thought from the adults in their environment. So, well done, parents, for teaching your daughter how to stand up for her rights and know what is fair. That's great.
Yeah, that is great. Thank you. Yeah, she's definitely not afraid to stand up for herself. That's for sure.
Ugh, love it.
She's going to be a leader. That one. She's going to be a CEO one day or something.
Love it. A friend of mine has made the joke on several occasions that her child is either going to be running the jail from the outside or the inside.
Hopefully from the outside.
Yeah. Oh, golly.
All right, Emry. So the next topic I wanted to touch on was about understanding your child's perspective. I know that's something that you talk about a lot.
I do. I do. Um, so often by the time that parents are coming to me, they're already at their wits' end, right? Like they're already tearing their hair out and they're like, nothing is working. I can't, my kid and I are not speaking the same language. And that's exactly how I like to frame it is you're not understanding each other. The way that you're explaining this, your child is either not developmentally ready for, or they're not emotionally ready for, perhaps. So if your child has that feeling of something being unfair, they're not going to be ready to hear how it's time to go clean up your toys right now. They're really busy focusing on well, but that's not fair. I'm not done building my tower yet.
Mhm.
So I love to get parents to take in that same beat that they're, doing their breathing exercise or they're throwing the pillow down. Once they're coming out of a trigger moment or a heightened moment, I love to say, okay, and now how can you relate to your child? Um, and it's not about, I had a parent say to me recently, he was like, my kid was crying because the cookie that I gave him was already broken. Like it came out of the package broken and he's all ticked off about it and crying, right? Like
Oh, I know all
hashtag
about
toddler
that.
life. So, he's like, and I can't relate to that. I can't empathize because it's a freaking cookie. And I feel like I'm a bad parent because I can't empathize. And I said, first of all, you're not a bad parent. And rather than empathize with your child's logic, try to empathize with their feelings. We understand that it's not logical. We understand that it's still a whole cookie, whether it comes in two pieces or one.
Mhm.
But his feelings about it as a toddler, that makes a lot of sense because that's where he's at developmentally. So I said to the dad, what things make you feel the same way that your child was feeling? And then suddenly it clicked, and he was like, oh, okay, well, these are the things that upset me and lead to those kinds of feelings. And so I can empathize with that feeling. Whether or not it makes any sense, totally irrelevant. A child is going to feel what they're going to feel. We don't have any control over that.
Mhm.
We don't have control over that in adults.
That's true.
We don't have control over that in ourselves sometimes,
Mhm.
right? Emotions are really, really muddy, twisty things.
Mhm.
um Yeah, so learning how to empathize with your child's feelings and not their logic is a great starting point. And thinking about, what do we want in our tough moments? We almost universally want either a little bit of space, or we want somebody to be with us, comforting us. We typically don't want somebody trying to solve our problems or trying to make us stop crying, right? That feels terrible when
Yeah.
we're upset about something and somebody's like, well, Why are you crying? Or imagine being told, I don't want to hear it, or stop.
Yeah. 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 Stop crying is definitely a big one. Um, let's say you had a kid that was constantly crying all the time for everything. Um, then what would you say to that kid if they're just constantly crying for everything all the time? Because here's an example. My one daughter is very emotional, and um, I've never told her to stop crying because, I want her to feel her emotions. But I feel like now she cries. She's a little bit older now, though. She's 6, but she cries a little bit too much. So I've just started telling her, you know, that's not something, not to stop crying, but that's not something that we should be crying about. So I want to get your perspective on that, if you don't mind.
Um, Jason, thank you so much for asking. I had no plans to do this, but if you'll allow me, I would love to share one of my core teachings.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, that would be great. So I designed this method called the AIM method. It's AIM. The A is for acknowledge, the I is identify, and the M is make a plan. So when a kid is crying, when they're having any sort of a big emotion that you need to respond to and go through and teach, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to acknowledge. We're not going to solve any problems. We're not going to try to change anything that's happening. That is all utterly pointless. Not only is it pointless, it can actually completely undercut everything you're trying to do because it changes the focus and puts it on the problem solving rather than on the learning. So, firstly, acknowledge. So, if your kid is crying over something, rather than even trying to figure out what it is, just, oh, big feelings? You got something going on there? And change up the language so that it's appropriate for different ages. So for a slightly older child, it's like, oh, okie dokie, and we're crying. Like, yep, I see you, I feel you, I am here. And you just pause for a minute and wait and see how it plays out. Never forget to give your kid some time to surprise you. That's really key. Sometimes they just need 10 seconds. Sometimes they need an hour, depending on their age.
Mhm.
But give it a minute, see what happens. Then move into the identifying. So, this is where you're going to talk with your child and try to figure out the most true thing. So, if the kid is sad, sure, but that's surface level. Sadness is usually covering for something a bit more deeper. And this is when I love to bring in an emotions wheel. I love an emotions wheel. So is it sadness just for the sake of sadness, or actually are you frustrated, or do you feel defeated, or are you actually angry? So then once you figure out what the most true thing is that's causing these feelings, then you can move into making a plan. And the plan is going to be first how to get through the rest of your time together and do some co-regulation, but it's also going to be for what about when this happens again in the future? What about when that person takes your toy tomorrow at kindergarten? How are we going to react? How are we going to respond? And now you have this beautiful teachable moment where you've built trust with your child because you listen to them, you acknowledge their problems as a real problem, and you've supported them by not fixing it for them, but giving them the tools to be able to do it for themselves.
Mhm.
And the next time it happens, the two of you have this beautiful thing that you can fall back on and move forward continuously together.
I love that, making a plan for next time and making it a learning experience. That's fabulous.
Thank you.
I need to
I'm
write that
very
down.
You can also come to one of my webinars next year.
So M stands for make a plan.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Thank
And with the
you.
emotions chart, we didn't have an emotions chart, but we had this thing on our wall, and it was all these different emoji faces. So with my
Yes.
one daughter, we would say, how are you feeling? And then because when she gets those strong feelings, she doesn't want to talk, so she would go over and point to the face. And I forgot about that until you brought it up, because we haven't done that for a while, but that was really helpful too.
I love that. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that when she's in a heightened emotional state that she doesn't want to talk. Parents, please do not force your kids
Mhm.
to talk. It's this phrase, use your words, that got really popular, like, I don't know, maybe 20-ish years ago, and is still reasonably popular today. And it's a huge step forward from what it used to be, which was answer me now or stop crying. Use your words was a huge step in the right direction, and I want to acknowledge that. I'm not here to shame anybody who's ever used that phrase. Caught myself using it a few times because, after all, I'm only human and I'm still deprogramming things that I was taught.
Mhm.
But use your words. We can go ahead and throw that away. We don't need to be forcing anybody to talk. And especially for a neurodivergent kid who is in a sensory overload and emotions overwhelm, talking is the last thing they're going to be capable of. My niece, this is her through and through. When this child is dysregulated, she will not speak. And we've worked out a system where, and she knows I will never make her speak. What we do is, instead of me saying, how are you feeling or what's going on, I ask her yes or no questions, and she gives me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And that's it. She'll sit on her bed or sit on the couch. We'll have some physical space from each other. I'll check in. Would you like me to be next to you? Yes, no. And usually she sits there and has her hair covering her face. So, she can't see me and I can't see her. She gets very, very withdrawn, or she'll even turn around so she's not facing me. That's fine. This is not a sign of disrespect. You do not need to have eye contact with your kids to know that they're listening. Let them have that space. That is really, really good stuff. They're processing. They need time and space to do that. So then, a few yes or no questions. Do you want me close? Do you want me far away? Hey, I'm wondering if maybe you're feeling this way because of this reason. Is that sort of true? Yes or no? Just to kind of let them know that you are aware that something is happening. And this still follows the AIM method. You're just demonstrating an awareness. We're not trying to solve any problems about it yet. Hey kid, I'm here. I love you. I'm going to take my cues from you, and you don't get to be terrible to me. We can solve this together. You don't get to be rude. You get to go take some time by yourself. That's not rude. You're just processing.
Absolutely. I love that. And that reminds me, oftentimes when our kids are freaking out or having strong emotions, we want to talk to them. And my wife will always remind me, and I always get pissed off because she's right, but she'll just say, stop talking or don't talk to her. The best thing to do is just walk away, let her have her space. And one thing that's really, with my oldest daughter, what's really helped for her, because she doesn't want to talk, is we give her, she's very visual and she likes drawing and she likes writing. So we give her a piece of paper or a whiteboard or a piece of paper, and we'll pass notes back and forth, whether it's under the door or whatever. So she's done that for a long time, but that's been really, really helpful for us. Just finding what works, right, for you.
Jason, that is a beautiful story. I love it. Like, no notes, flawless, beautiful parenting.
Hmm.
I had that happen with a student once as well. It was this was back when I was working for a school district in near Seattle. I had a student who was typically pretty good natured, typically had a pretty great attitude, and it took a particular liking to me. So we had this nice little buddy relationship going on. And she was real grumpy this one day. And I was like, what is your problem? Like, this is so unlike you. What is your deal? What is going on? And she had her face down on the desk and with her arms covering her face, and I was sitting there going, I was just racking my brain, like, what is triggering this kid right now? And so I wrote her a little note and I said, did you have breakfast this morning? And passed it to her under her arms, and she read it and she looked up at me like total sheepish grin and was like, no, because I didn't have any time. And I was like, go get a snack. I'll see you in 10 minutes. Changed the whole rest of our day. The whole rest of our day was great. I love passing notes to kids. It's a great way to communicate.
It's pretty fun. Yeah, my kids love writing notes, and it's funny because when they're mad, the first note will be "I hate you," and then the last note will usually be "I love you and you're the best." My daughters write me notes all the time. I have like a million. I have them all up, drawings and pictures all over my wall in my bedroom.
Oh, I love that. So true. So true. Um, my niece one time, when she was in a really tough moment of dysregulation, she said the one thing that can actually hurt me. And she said, I don't feel safe with you, and then ran off crying. And I was like, oh. And I, as I always do, I take a beat and I turn inward and I go, okay, did I cross a boundary? Did I do something that could make her feel unsafe? Or is she just being reactive? And that was tough because I was scared. I was scared to look inside and see, did I do something that crossed a line? Did I push her too hard, or did I say something contradictory or hypocritical? Um, and later, once she was no longer dysregulated, we talked about it. And I said, hey, listen, if I am doing something that makes you feel not safe, like with your emotions, you got to tell me because I want to fix it. And in the end, she was like, no, I was just really mad. I was like, oh my God. Okay, I can sleep tonight. But yeah, that's tough stuff when they get a bit older and can start putting those bigger phrases, those hard-hitting phrases together.
Hmm. And how old was your niece?
She's 10.
Okay, yeah, yeah. My
Yeah.
oldest, my oldest is 8, but she's going to be 9 this year. It's crazy how fast
Oh
time.
man.
It's
And
crazy.
and when you raise them with emotional intelligence, it happens so fast. It happens so much faster. I take care of a 2-year-old twice a week. He's almost 3 now. And I don't know where we were. I think we were probably at the aquarium. We go to the aquarium all the time. But he doesn't call it the aquarium. He calls it sharks. We're going to go to the sharks. And I'm never going to correct him, not ever, because it's just too cute. So, and it was like, it was time to go. And I was saying, all right, let's get ready to go. And he didn't want to go. And at some point he said, Emry, you are not listening to me. I want to stay and look at the sharks. You are not listening to my words. And I was like, you're so right. Yes, I hear your words, and it is time to go. I'm terribly sorry.
Time to go is always the hardest, isn't it?
But man, this kid is just fire. I don't know any other 2-year-old. who can emotional intelligence me.
That's amazing. And
I love it.
one other thing I wanted to talk to you about was diet and how our the kids' diet is going to impact their behavior. So one thing that my mom used to always say to me, she's like, I don't know what's different about the kids these days, or like not just my mom, lots of people have said that to me. Like when you were a kid, you weren't like that. I don't know what's different. And then one day I kind of put a couple things together. I'm like, well, maybe the all this crap that they're eating has a little bit to do with their behavior issues. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that and how the diet can affect the behavior of a child.
Get ready for me to burst your bubble. Are you
All right.
ready?
Yep.
That is just all utter nonsense. It is. I'm not a dietitian. I want to be super clear about that. But other people who are way smarter than me about those things have done that research, and that research shows none of that is true.
Interesting.
Um, so the big one that I know parents are really concerned about is sugar.
Mhm.
And first of all, I made a sugar quiz for Halloween, and it was so good. And I got such good feedback from parents about it because they were so surprised at some of the information. I turned it into stories and have it saved as a highlight reel on my Instagram. So you can go check that out and learn some interesting facts about sugar. Um, the thing that is the most likely to be true is number one, if the kid has an intolerance or the food that they're consuming is doing something to their body that's making them feel uncomfortable, that's going to cause behavioral issues. If they're not eating enough or if they're eating too much, that's going to cause bodily
Mhm.
discomfort and mess with their behavior. I get brain fog if I don't eat enough,
Mhm.
or if I've just been using too many calories because I've been working too hard that day for whatever reason, whether it's physical or mental, and that affects my behavior. It's the same thing for kids. But as far as overall diet, and especially in the Western world, like our kids are by and large getting plenty of nutrients. That's not the thing that's messing with their behavior. It's it's the it's the conglomeration of all of these other environmental factors. It's 10% this, 5% that, 20% this. And when you put all of those things together, we do see a behavioral shift over time, for sure.
Yeah.
The kids of today behave differently than we behaved in some ways, and in other ways, not at all. Kids have been the same since the dawn of time. And societal norms are the things that are changing. And I think I'm not a social scientist. I don't have the answers. I don't have the data. I haven't done any studies. But my anecdotal opinion, based on my observations, is that people are reaching for those answers because they're observing it on some level. And
Mhm.
I think that they're reaching for the answers that make the most sense to them based on their day to day. So, food is one of those things that it's like, okay, well, I'm now being mindful about what I'm feeding my family. And I'm also noticing these behavioral changes. Maybe there's a correlation
Mhm.
when really, or maybe there's a causation when really it's just a correlation, or it's just that these two things exist at the same time.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think sugar is a big one for sure. Obviously, if you give a kid a bunch of sugar, they're going to go a little bit crazy. But
Nope. That is actually completely scientifically untrue. And thank you for saying it, because now I get to share that information with you. And I want to be so clear. I don't fault you for having that belief because that's what we all got taught. There is no correlation, no causation between sugar and hyperactivity. Um, I can't remember the full information of it now, but it's in my sugar quiz. But it's really funny, the study that
Interesting.
they did where parents were like, no, really, my kid gets more hyper with sugar. And like the way that it was disproved so hard.
Hmm.
More than likely, what it's about is that typically when kids are having lots and lots of sugar, it's because it's centered around either a holiday time or, some sort of an event where things are
Halloween.
more Halloween, where things are a bit more exciting anyway.
Yeah.
And so they just see a surge of energy. Even if it's just them sitting around at home, though, really what it boils down to is it's our beliefs that perpetuate this idea. And this has been scientifically proven, again, by people who are much smarter than me, who have the data. But I can link you to that data. It is on my Insta.
Very interesting. Awesome. Thank you for
Totally, right?
So my next question is my other favorite thing: screen time. Um,
Yay!
that's another thing. Well, I notice, screen time. We let our kids play on the iPad a little bit, but I notice that sometimes, we'll let them play for like 20 minutes or so. But after their time's up, I notice, their emotions change a little bit, and I almost look at it like drugs. Like when it's done, they want more, they want more, they want more. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on screen time and what advice you have for the parents out there.
So, my opinions on screen time are very, very gray. There is a ton of nuance. And this is where I say, the phrase, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. What's good for the goose is not necessarily good for the gander here. What's right for one kid is not going to be right for the next kid. There
Right.
is no black and white, this is right, this is wrong. And it's going to change day to day. Um, if you're going on an 11-hour flight, please, for the love of God, bring the iPad. Like, do yourself a favor. Um, Screen time. I'm going to say that my personal belief is that screen time is not the enemy. It is not evil. It is not the thing that's going to cause behavioral problems. That's not the root. Could it be a symptom? Absolutely. But TVs, phones, iPads, tablets, this technology is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. To
Right.
pretend otherwise is silly. So, my personal view is I think it's great if parents can teach how to use screens safely, and in a way that makes sense for the family. So, for example, there's a lot of great stuff on YouTube for kids and for kids to do with their parents. There's tons of like movement songs. There's lots of stories, and like books kind of brought to life with a little bit of animation. There's wonderful, wonderful content on there. Do that.
Yeah.
Do that with your kids. Model how great screen time can be. Because also, man, I am so not down with pretending like screens are the enemy. What are we teaching? But
Yeah.
if we can model, because let's not kid ourselves, we all have our favorite shows. We all love to Netflix and chill. There's a reason that these streaming um, places are making as much money as they're making. It's because we all want the content. So
Yeah.
let's not pretend we don't. Let's lean into it in a way that makes sense for our kids. Have some fun, get silly with it, enjoy yourselves. I did this with some clients just the other day. We did a whole bunch of movement songs, and it was so beautiful watching this mom connect with her kids in this new way that she had never done before, because she was struggling to find a way to play with them that felt right for her and wasn't where, the kids were tearing her in two because one wanted this and one wanted this. So I was like, let's try YouTube. And she's going, is that okay? And I'm like, heck yes, it is. And we did these movement songs. And then at the end, we did a meditation, a kid's meditation, guided meditation. And then we watched and listened to a book. And man, if that wasn't the most beautiful use of 30 to 45 minutes, and then it was done. And anything that a kid enjoys, they're going to ask for more of. I don't know why it is that we notice it
True, yeah.
more when it's about a screen, when they want more, at nighttime, and it's like one more book, one more book, one more book. That's no different than one more show, one more show, one more show. It's just something they enjoy, and it's okay that they enjoy it. It's not wrong that they
Yeah.
do.
No, that's a good point. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for asking. This is the stuff that I am so happy to be passing along to parents. If I could help one parent release the hold that, I don't know who these people are that are saying that screens are so bad, but if I could get one parent to feel like they can just let go of those voices in their head and those whispers in their ear, then it's a great day.
Well, I think you got that worked with me a little bit. So thank you for that.
Yay! I'm
Emry,
so glad.
we're coming to the end of our time here. That went by pretty fast. But before we wrap things up, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with the listeners today?
Gosh, if I could just encourage parents to, before they believe everything they hear from whatever sources, if I could just encourage you to slow down and use your flex your critical thought muscles, run it through some checkers, do some more digging, talk to somebody else in the field. There's lots of parent coaches out there. Check in with somebody, check in with your friends, check in with your family, have a little family meeting about something before you make a decision because you saw something on Instagram. Even one of my videos, it has to be right for you. Go through your values and assess if it sits well with you. And if it doesn't sit well with you, don't implement it yet.
Right. Amazing. Great advice. And for everyone listening, sorry I messed up there. That's amazing. And where can people find you if they want to connect with you, Emry?
I can be found in a whole lot of places. My website, emrykettle.com. I have my own podcast, Parenting for Thought, where of course you can see Jason Dobie featured in episode 2. Instagram. Yeah. I'm all over the internet.
Amazing. Well, that was fabulous. Thank you so much, Emry, for joining us today. That was really great. And for everyone listening, I'll include Emery's information in the show notes below. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on Instagram at transformative_pathways. You can also find my link tree in the show notes, where you can find links to all my social media, my email list, my private community, and options to book a free consultation or apply to my one-on-one coaching programs. And if you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love it if you could like, subscribe, and follow us on your favorite listening platform. And if you'd like to support the show, we'd love it if you could take a moment to leave a review. It would mean so much to us and also help the show reach more people. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we look forward to connecting with you again soon.
This has been the Transformative Pathways Podcast with your host, Jason Dobie. Tune in each week for more insights, inspiring stories, and transformative journeys. Until then, keep exploring the path to keep your best self. Saturdays, 3 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network, powered by B2 Studios.